Do you ever find yourself in a conversation you don't want to be having, or maybe the subject has just gone on for too long? Today, I'd like to talk about some polite ways to lead the conversation in a direction that hopefully everyone will enjoy. I've spoken a lot about conversations, including a series of podcasts about how to start a conversation, how to continue a conversation, and then there was one on how to politely end a conversation. But what if you aren't enjoying the way the conversation is going and you want to change it? That's what I'd like to talk about today. So, of course, I'm assuming you want to be polite. Of course, you could be rude and just say, "Oh, I'm not really interested in this topic. Let's talk about something I like." That actually might end the conversation, which might be okay with you. But if it's someone you need to associate with, it might also end your hopes of any good relationships in the future. So, of course, it's best to find polite ways to change the subject. Your relationship with the person will also affect which approach that you use, but always do it with a positive attitude. And it can even be a little bit funny. I once read a Huffington Post article about how to change a conversation with one simple word. They suggested the word anywho. Go ahead, try it. Anywho. You could say it with expression. Anywho, sort of draw it out, say it with a smile or funny expression, and people will get the point, may even laugh along with you. And then make sure you're ready with another smile and then a pleasant topic to segue into. Of course, if you're not comfortable with that, another technique is to find a key point that the person mentions, which can then lead into a different conversation. For instance, if the person keeps talking about her cat and you're allergic, so it's not something you can relate to, listen for words that can lead to something else. For instance, if the person shares how nimble her cat is, say, "Oh, yes, certain animals have really interesting traits. I enjoy animals too. And in fact, I have a membership to the zoo. Have you been to the zoo recently?" Lead the conversation to a broader discussion, and in this case, a broader discussion of animals. Then perhaps you can lead it to other points of interest in the city, or again, even broader than the topic that you brought it to. Again, if that aligns with the interests of both you and your conversation partner. You could also use a word that he or she mentions and lead to something else. Like, for example, you could say, "Oh, speaking of which," or "That reminds me, I've been meaning to tell you." If nothing in the conversation gives you a useful springboard, you could just try, "I just thought of something before I forget." This is similar to the last suggestion, but doesn't have to be directly related. Or you could redirect back to an earlier topic in the conversation. When there's a pause, try, "I was intrigued by what you said earlier about. Can you tell me more?" That still makes the person feel really good and sticks to a topic you both like. A similar approach is to flatter and then switch to a different subject. I think this works well in more professional or serious conversations. You make a good point about the national debt. How do you feel about campaign funding? The idea is to switch to a topic you know more about and that interests you. Sometimes drawing someone else into the conversation helps. Start speaking a little louder or making eye contact with someone else nearby. If you're standing, turn your body out a bit, just a little bit, to indicate that you're open to the conversation of others. When that person shows interest, ask his opinion. Alternatively, once the person is interested, then wait for a pause and direct a different question entirely to that person, changing the subject. Or again, when there's a pause, you can try complimenting the person suddenly. "Oh, I love your necklace. It's so unusual. I bet there's a story behind that." Or mention something in your immediate surroundings. If all else fails, excuse yourself briefly. There's a former CIA agent, Joe Navarro, that said that when he was an undercover agent and people would start asking him questions that might blow his cover, he'd excuse himself to the restroom and come back starting a completely different conversation. Or you can offer to go to the bar or the buffet to get refills. Or say you just remember that you had to make a really important phone call and step away. Just don't say, "So where were we?" when you get back. Finally, you could try not to change the subject or anything. Then, of course, you change the subject. Most people will laugh along with you and recognize what you're doing. Obviously, your familiarity with your conversation partner or the setting of the conversation will dictate which approach works best. But start practicing so you'll be comfortable enough to use the techniques in more formal situations. And soon you'll be a pro at having interesting conversations everyone enjoys.